Right, so has Jeremy Corbyn called curtains on Keir Starmer's career with his calls for a Chilcot-style inquiry? Almost a tongue twister, that, as just as Corbyn made the calls and condemnations in relation to Tony Blair over the Iraq war, he is again showing himself to be on the right side of history once more by again demanding investigation into warfare and warmongering in relation to complicity with Israel into the genocide they have been committing in Gaza. Starmer is functionally screwed no matter what he does here as a result. If he goes ahead with the inquiry, then his own comments about Israel's right to cut off water to Gaza will come out, and the not so secret but shh, don't tell anybody what you're doing guys pep talk at RAF Akrotiri that Starmer gave might come back to bite him as well, amongst other actions. Will the details of that come out further beyond the now increasingly well-known surveillance flights the RAF has been conducting over Gaza airspace and the use of the airbase by the US as well? If Starmer blocks any investigation, he'll be accused of a cover-up. Too many incidents and too many questions going observed and unanswered for that we deserve to know more about. Deserve to know what the UK government is doing for and with Israel in our name, complicity as that very much appears to be. And increasingly, this will be the more difficult option for Starmer to pursue when it isn't just Corbyn and others in his independent alliance that are making this demand of him, but more and more MPs from across the progressive parties, and including several members of Labour itself too, who are also now backing this call. We need an investigation into what you've been doing, Starmer. So it's your move, Sunshine.
Over 30 MPs have now joined the call for an inquiry into all of the government's policies and actions in relation to what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. A Chilcot-style inquiry. I raised this issue first at the beginning of March, and it's had a massive response from the public and many organisations and people. We need to know how the decisions were made on the use of the Royal Air Force Base at Akrotiri in Cyprus, and how the decisions were made on the delivery of weapons to Israel, which have been used to bomb Gaza. 15% of all of the parts of an F-35 jet are made here in Britain. Without those parts, it couldn't fly. If it wasn't flying, it wouldn't be able to bomb schools and hospitals and roads and houses in Gaza. We need to know, and we're not going to give up. We're going to be relentless in getting to the truth.
I'm very clear. Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation. Obviously, everything should be done within international law, but I don't want to step away from the sort of core principles that Israel has a right to defend herself and Hamas bears responsibility for these terrorist acts. And I would call on all responsible states, particularly Middle East responsible states, to call this out for what it is, and to stand with the world in utterly condemning these actions by Hamas.
Right, so that was Jeremy Corbyn there explaining exactly why he wants to see a Chilcot-style inquiry into UK actions in relation to Israel and connected with Israel's atrocities in Gaza, followed by that now infamous clip of Keir Starmer justifying everything Jeremy Corbyn is requesting, admitting on radio, as he did, that he backed Israel committing war crimes, though he has denied he's ever said any such thing ever since. The truth and Starmer being strangers at the best of times, and this video clip proving just that point. For too long, the UK has offered its unwavering support for Israel's war on Gaza, a campaign now widely recognised as a genocide, plausibly proven as such at the International Court of Justice. And this has exposed the grotesque hypocrisy of Starmer's regime, and indeed that of Rishi Sunak's before him, who were just as vociferously loyal to Israel as well. As Israel continues its slaughter, its displacement of 2 million Palestinians happening all over again now, and the killing of more than 40,000 people, of which they have been mostly women and children, the UK government has not only failed to condemn the atrocities, but has actively enabled them through political backing, through military support, and diplomatic cover. This would, of course, have never been the case under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. It would never have happened under Corbyn's Labour. He is a long-standing critic of Western militarism and imperialism, and as such, last month, called for a Chilcot-style inquiry into the UK's complicity in Gaza's destruction, a call that is now being supported by dozens of MPs from across the political divide, heaping more and more pressure on the ever more unpopular Starmer to, for once, do the right thing. This demand, however, could prove politically fatal for Keir Starmer, whose prime ministership has been defined by his unflinching support for Israel, no matter what war crimes or atrocities it seems to be able to commit. And so this demand from Corbyn has evoked parallels with the Iraq War now, which the Chilcot inquiry, of course, investigated. That's what it was all about. And the comparisons are certainly undeniable. Just as Tony Blair was damned by the Chilcot inquiry for misleading the public and taking the UK into an illegal war, something he is still owed a massively overdue day in court over, in my view, that he's probably never going to get, Starmer risks being exposed all the more in this era of social media and political words and deeds being recorded for all to see, and for endorsing what the International Court of Justice has ruled a plausible genocide. Should an inquiry proceed, therefore, it would not only scrutinise the UK's role in Gaza, but could also destroy Starmer's credibility, revealing him as a collaborator in one of the 21st century's most horrific crimes, to a degree never before seen in British politics. And the consequences, political and potentially criminal even, would be dire for all concerned. I would certainly hope would be dire for all concerned. Now, that isn't to say this would necessarily be a quick investigation, though. Chilcot came in for severe criticism given how long he took to deliver his inquiry. 7 years to complete that investigation from the announcement of it through to results being presented. And of course, having only been commissioned late 2000s, years after the Iraq War had actually happened, it was way overdue even then. Finally published in 2016 as it was, under the then leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, though, the report concluded that the UK's joined the US-led invasion on false pretenses, with no credible evidence of weapons of mass destruction ever being found, WMDs, that Tony Blair ignored legal warnings that the war lacked UN authorization, following George Bush around come what may, and that the government failed to properly plan for post-war reconstruction in Iraq, leading to catastrophic destabilization and leading to, amongst other things, as we saw, the rise of ISIS. Chilcot's findings were absolutely damning. They confirmed what anti-war activists had long argued, that Blair had blood on his hands. And given the war was deemed to be about regime change rather than out of any semblance of national security, it was illegal. Jeremy Corbyn at the time, of course, was a backbencher. He was still one of the few Labour MPs who consistently opposed the war, though. In 2016, he apologised on behalf of his party for going to war on false pretences, yet there were still those in Labour at that time who defended it even after that. For example, Angela Eagle, who at the time was briefly challenging Corbyn for the Labour leadership, warned him not to take revenge against Blair, because God forbid he do that. She, of course, had voted for the Iraq War. Corbyn's stance cemented his moral authority, proving he was on the right side of history once again. Now he is applying the exact same principles to Gaza by demanding transparency over UK involvement in Israel's genocide. The UK's support for Israel's war is emphatic. Evidence shows direct military, intelligence and diplomatic collaboration. And of course there has been the clampdown on protest and planning protests here in the UK when it comes to Gaza as well. For example, there is the clip I showed a moment ago, Keir Starmer in that infamous interview with LBC's Nick Ferrari, stating that Israel had the right to cut off water and electricity to Gaza, which was a clear violation of international law. And Starmer must have known that, given his own career as a barrister previously, or at the very least should have known. When challenged, he doubled down, effectively endorsing what amounted to collective punishment, which is a war crime. And on top of that, of course, has been the military and intelligence support. According to Declassified UK, who have been at the forefront of examining UK intelligence flights from RAF Akrotiri, they have chased this line of investigation more than any other outlet that I've seen. The UK has conducted spy plane missions, providing intelligence to Israel, allegedly in the search for hostages held by Hamas, but how Israel chooses to use such information, given their actions across Gaza, is highly questionable and ought to be robustly investigated and tested. And then there have been the US-UK joint strikes on Yemen, where the UK joined US airstrikes allegedly on Houthi forces in retaliation for their blockade of Israel-bound ships, and on Israeli territory in support of Gaza, as they have been doing. Yet so many of these attacks have been on Yemeni civilians and civilian infrastructure, because intelligence on Houthi assets and whereabouts is scant. And yet the strikes went ahead anyway and continue repeatedly. And then there are the arms exports, where despite the suspension of some arms licences, which came after a concerted effort, the UK continues supplying some military aid, most notably components for F-35 jets used in Gaza bombardments. And then there is the diplomatic cover provided, the visits to Israel by Labour MPs, the visit by Israeli officials, military figures even, to the UK under special protections, and Foreign Office figures going to Israel repeatedly, notably David Lammy on more than one occasion since Labour came back into power, to press the flesh with Netanyahu and make it clear whose side the UK government is on, in no small part likely down to how heavily lobbied the Labour Party are. And something which must also form part of a Chilcot-style inquiry should one happen. Just how bought and paid for by the Israel lobby are so many of our politicians, not just in Labour, but across the House. Oh, Corbyn is absolutely calling for one, and a good many MPs seem to have answered the call to that, though sadly this is still a significant minority of those in Parliament. 650 MPs, his call has since been backed by around 30 MPs from across his own independent alliance, but also MPs from Starmer's Labour itself, Sinn Féin, who don't even take their seats in Parliament, but they've still signed this, the Green Party, the SNP, and Plaid Cymru, progressive parties, not the usual suspects. Nobody from the Labour right, certainly nobody from the Tories or the Lib Dems or Reform UK. Human rights groups have also been echoing demands for transparency. For Starmer, this is a political nightmare. A robust inquiry, you would imagine or hope, would expose his complicity in endorsing war crimes, as he's apparently done on camera already, caught on film, as those have been, despite subsequent denials, and despite him never taking responsibility for anything going wrong. He never apologises for anything. Try and remember a time when Starmer actually said sorry for something. You will struggle. He would have to defend his actions, largely seen as being done at the behest of the Israel lobby, just as Blair did with Iraq. But with the mountain of evidence being captured in real time throughout Israel's atrocities, a timeline of evidence will have built up against Starmer's decisions in a way it never really did for Blair. And as members of Labour itself increasingly demand a change of tack and proper scrutiny in governmental decisions taken by their own party's leadership, so the party could find itself split all the more, the MPs more and more out of alignment with the wishes of the greater party, who are dictated to rather than forming part of the decision-making process, and made all the more remarkable as that is, given Starmer's purge of the left. Worse still, Starmer cannot escape this scrutiny either. If he blocks an inquiry, he looks guilty. If he allows one, it seems very likely it's going to condemn him to some extent or other. History may well be set to repeat itself. Just as Blair was exposed for Iraq, Starmer risks being damned by Gaza, but in a far shorter space of time. Corbyn's demand for a Chilcot-style inquiry is not just about accountability, it's about forcing Britain to confront its role as an enabler of genocide, and it has to end. None of us want this done in our names, yet still it happens. And what do we do to stop it? This government is out of kilter with the British public and is on the wrong side of history, and they will be punished at the ballot box for this, along with a great deal of other reasons to do so besides. We must keep demanding answers. We deserve answers. We deserve to know what is being done in our name by our government in the interest of an occupying power that is committing genocide, a word Starmer can't even bring himself to say. Protests, petitions, electoral pressure can force Parliament's hand. If an inquiry proceeds, Starmer's career may not survive the fallout. Oh dear, how sad, never mind, as most of us might well think of that. But more importantly, the truth about UK-backed war crimes must be exposed, because it's high time this country stopped being party to such things. Accountability has to start somewhere. Here and now is as good a place and time as ever. Is Starmer man enough to face it, or will he run away from it? And will we have to keep chasing him to get it? Do tell me your thoughts about that in the comments below. Meanwhile, we should also be asking similar questions of those choosing to still fund Starmer's Labour right now, given all of this, given its attacks on ordinary working class people as well, and its apparent complicity in this genocide. Why are the trade unions, for one, still funding them? What are they giving membership dues to a party only working for the very rich these days for? There is a video attempting to answer that question. And why not? Why not only should you join a union, actually, but realise it as a political entity as well as a work-based one, and take part in the political process there too. More important than ever before with the state of Labour under Starmer. So do check it out as your suggested next watch here. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.